Hi, my name is Saaj. I'm from the East Coast, New England area, and here I have Dave. Dave, you want to give a quick intro of yourself?
Yes, I am from Southern California. I live in San Diego.
All
Um,
right.
I have a lot of opinions. I don't know jack shit, but let's see.
I think I'm in the same boat, but we'll give it a try.
We both
So,
are car fanatics. Well, not fanatics, but enthusiasts. No,
enthusiast, I
we're
would
not
say, yeah,
fanatics. I have a cousin who's a fanatic, but Sergeant
yeah.
is not a fanatic.
Well, today we're going to talk about self-driving vehicles.
Yes,
It's a big topic. When I posted this on Instagram, I posted a poll on what topic we should talk about, and majority voted for self-driving vehicles. And self-driving vehicles is a really broad topic. There's a lot of different components involved, and I think, in my opinion, we're at still a development stage. Um, so from what I've been looking at in terms of self-driving, it's we've been developing it for decades. And when I say we
right.
as humans, it's been developed for decades. And even with the development, there's a lot of limitations. Some of the limitations that I see myself, even when you're driving, like on a day to day, and you might agree with me, Dave, is when you're driving, you might see a pothole, right? There might be construction, there might be lines on the road that are not exactly to,
Right.
something that humans that might be able to grasp and be like, okay, I know where this is going, or there may be like a double line, one line you're supposed to disregard, one line you're supposed to kind of, use your as your focal point. But as I think majority of the people know, self-driving vehicles are mainly based off of sensors, and I believe you brought up the topic to me that there's also now communication involved. We were talking about 5G. You want to touch upon that?
Yeah, I think 5G is very important for a self-driving car or a flying car for that matter. Is because with the current bandwidth we have, the 4G LTE, there is just not enough bandwidth to process data, especially. I'll give you an example. Can you imagine if if the self-driving car was driving in New Jersey, say Oak Tree Road,
Yeah.
and it runs into a bunch of Indians who are wearing saris and a bunch of Indian clothes and cannot distinguish, the difference, but what that is, and it gets confused, quite frankly. And that's what kind of happened in Arizona last time I think a couple of years ago. I think it was a Google car that ran over a pedestrian because it wouldn't recognize wearing the bicycle helmet. So stuff like that. Um, in order for the car to learn what's on the road, it needs 5G technology.
So
Unfortunately, we're not even close on 5G. So I just don't know when the self-driving cars thing is going to work.
so you're saying that the 5G technology would kind of make the AI a live system that it learns automatically as other vehicles can see. So that way it's not like you wait a month for an update to bring the software
Yeah,
to.
yeah. It's almost a combination of AI and machine learning. Um, and right now with LTE, it's just not possible. So um, China is a leader in 5G. They do have they are ahead of us because I mean they can cut regulations, and I mean they're not a democracy at the end, so they could do anything they want. For us, we have issues because one of the leaders in 5G, Huawei, they're banned in America. They can't do business, and they have a lot of infrastructure that they can install in parts of the nation, but it's just not happening because of the trade wars and IP wars and whatnot. So
Well, I know there was an article that you shared with me, I think sometime last week, where it it really talked about even the workforce. We're really limited on
yeah.
the workforce.
Yeah, that's true. We just don't have the workforce to do any of this work. Even if we get all the equipment, who's going to install them, right? So AT&T is having issues, Verizon's having issues. There's not I mean, they all have a goal, but there's no clear plan on how to get to the goal. Um, and this trade war with China is definitely hurting us in that sense because, and I think what Trump is trying to do is use Huawei as a bargaining chip, meaning, if Huawei wants to do business, and look, Huawei had a call a couple of weeks ago, and they said they're going to have a pretty bad 2020 because of this. But yeah, so I think it's let's see how the next 6 months go. I think in 2017, 18, everybody was talking by 2020 we would have self-driving cars on the road. I just don't see that happening. The other thing is state laws. I'll give you an example. If you want to drive from California to Arizona, the laws on the roads, they change. And right now, there are so many different laws that, like Tesla, for instance, one of the reasons, I mean, they have everything ready. They just can't put it out because they just don't have all the data in yet to, Arizona has different laws for certain lines that California doesn't have,
Well, it probably gets worse when you cross borders to go to like Mexico or I go to Canada or something.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just not there yet. I think we are getting there. And I have no idea how long it's going to take. There's a good chance we may see a flying car before we see a self-driving car.
Interesting.
It's because flying cars are going to be mandated. I mean, they're designed by Boeing, and they're going to put in the grid system, which is a federal thing. And it's much easier to do one federal regulation than doing 50 different local and state ones,
That still is probably limited by the 5G, though.
Exactly. Aurora Science, they do a lot of these flying cars, but they have the same limitation, 5G. As soon as 5G kicks in, I think a lot of doors are going to open, not only for transportation but other things,
Now, the one thing I wanted to note to the listeners is that 5G, and this is the way I understand it, 5G is one of those connections that's really fast, but the broadband, the distance of what that connection is very short. So if you're at a intersection and there's a 5G bar, you're getting 5G there. It's not necessarily going to be the same case if you walk a block down or you walk around a building. You might lose that 5G. It's kind of like you can get really slow speeds, but at very far lanes from the tower, or you can get very high speeds, but you have to stay really close to the, I would say, tower. But it's on telephone poles. That's how they're putting 5G. That's not full towers. So
I used to manage buildings that had cell towers, and they had just recently upgraded, and that's exactly the case. The whole building, the parameters have these small antennas. They look like they're not very big. They're like 4x4, some of them at least, and they're plastered all around the building. And you're right, the 5G is only like in that neighborhood. If you go a block up, you're back to 4G. So, but that tells you what kind of infrastructure it's going to take in order to have a 5G nationwide. I just don't see that happening,
It would have to be on almost every corner of every,
And America is so expansive that, how are we going to cover everything, And that this is the point where the self-driving car almost doesn't really make sense because, yeah, it may work in San Diego or Boston, but can you imagine going from Wichita, Kansas to Independence, Kansas, and how that ride's going to be, So, I don't know.
Well, the other limitations that I see are there's the roads. They're not perfect. The self-driving vehicles that we have now, the way that Tesla has they're most well known for the self-driving vehicles. They're using sensors and the road conditions, whether it's the weather, if it snows, ice, rain, if there's a thunderstorm, if there is lack of lines on the road, it's very difficult for the vehicle to actually kind of recognize, okay, am I going on the right path? I think that's another limitation that self-driving vehicles have right now.
Yeah, man. I personally would not get into a self-driving car. I don't even like humans driving it, so driving is dangerous sometimes, and I think if we rely too much on technology, I don't know what's going to happen. So.
Well, I remember James May said once on Top Gear that we've always had self-driving vehicles, They're called taxis.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that's what the other thing is. If you look at all the Teslas they're selling, I mean, with one update, they can make everything self-driving. And I think that's what they're going to do once 5G kicks in. And then I worry about, well, I'm not worried about it, but what's going to happen to Uber and Lyft? Because if there are self-driving Teslas on the road, who needs a Lyft, or Uber for that matter? So,
Well, that also, driving experience, what happens to the people that, I mean, how does the standards get lower or increased for learning how to drive? How does that work?
all these millennials, I guess some of the younger millennials, they don't even like driving, man. They like the scooters. In San Diego, everybody loves the scooters.
So we're losing car enthusiasts.
Yes, and we're getting a bunch of scooter enthusiasts.
It might not
Scooter,
be a
have you
bad
been on a
thing.
scooter, by the way?
I have a scooter myself. It's a
Wait a minute, you
50.
have one of the birds? You just took one off the streets?
No, I have a Tao 50. It's a 50 cc red little scooter that the speedometer it might be, I think it says miles per hour and kilometers per hour, but I don't think it's correct. It says 35. I think I'm going 25. It's a pretty slow.
It's dangerous, man.
It is dangerous. It's hard to take turns on those. The wheels are really small. So, and the roads aren't really great here, so it's not like, I have to look at the road and ahead at the same time, making sure that even a little small hole can probably
Yeah,
become
you
a
can
dangerous situation.
I'm not a big fan of scooters. I've never been on one actually, so.
Well, I'll say this, it's a different experience, and I used to use it as a daily, to go to
Yeah.
work, and
How long's your commute, my friend?
well, where I used to work, it used to be by car about 12 to 15 minutes. With the scooter, I had to probably 25 to 30. Not only the laws in Massachusetts, we were only allowed to drive on the right-hand lane, kind of to the side. Not we're not allowed to go on the highway. So even if I wanted to go through a highway, if that's a shorter route, I would have to take the local roads because that's a long. That's what the rules are. I mean, I can't get towards highway speeds in that scooter anyway. So,
You live a dangerous life, my friend.
well, that was before. Now, I have my Volkswagen,
Yeah.
and the biggest thing about that is the reliability. Other than that, it's good.
Yeah, Volkswagen, they're good cars, no?
They're good cars. I did get a check engine light yesterday. I did not check it yet. Um, I'll figure it out probably today or tomorrow. But it did come on 2 weeks ago. Then it turned back off, and then I got it back yesterday. I think 2 weeks ago we were planning to do a podcast.
Yeah, I
The
know.
six
We've been
same,
trying to do this for a while now.
yeah. And then I got the check engine light. So I think it was that if we were planning for it, the check engine light was gonna come on coincidentally.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
hate those
that's
check engine lights.
yeah. Well, I'll say one thing. The check engine lights, it's good and it's not good. Obviously, there's a lot of fixing, there are a lot of repairs that come after it, but it's supposed to help for the efficiency of the vehicle and also the safety. So if
It brings me,
sorry, repeat that.
it brings me anxiety, the check engine light.
Oh, I think yeah, that definitely brings me anxiety too. I think with the Toyotas that we have, the when we see a check engine light, immediately in my mind I'm like O2 sensor. It's always an O2 sensor.
Yeah.
So
So
for
yeah,
so
I don't have anything else to add. So I think 5G is going to be the key. I think everybody's waiting and seeing how the next 6 months go, maybe a year, and what kind of infrastructure the cell companies are able to lay out. But we made a good point about how limited they are in the range. So unless they plaster them all over town, and this is going to look hideous, I don't know how this thing's going to work.
well, they'll have to make trees that look like
Yeah.
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 And
They have those trees on a golf course. I mean, you could tell it's a fake tree. I mean,
yeah.
you know.
But I think the biggest challenge is not only putting up these 5G towers, the other challenge is to maintaining them.
Yeah.
Who knows what can happen. I mean, if a car crashes into a telephone pole and that 5G antenna is right on it, can come off, and that means you lose that area for 5G. And I don't know how I don't know the full technology if they daisy chain them or it's individually connected, but either way, it can become a dangerous situation if there are vehicles and people relying on this type of connection.
I think we should invite a guest who knows more about 5G and grill him. I'm
You
sure we know
you
somebody.
you have anyone in mind?
Um, Neil knows a lot about stuff. He's working on a lot of cool things. Um, I don't know. Maybe we can convince him to show up.
That sounds like a good idea.
He does. He,
Well,
he knows a lot about 5G and flying cars. Actually,
interesting.
he's working on some pretty cool things.
So I guess we'll call him up to do a follow up on this podcast then.
Yeah, we should just call him up and put him on the spot. He would enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And he himself is a car enthusiast. He got
Yes, he
pilot,
is.
but that's okay.
Well, I mean, there are you can be a car enthusiast and also drive a practical vehicle. So
I don't know if I could ever drive a minivan.
we have one if you want to
I mean,
drive
it
it.
is practical. I get it, but I don't have any kids yet. And if I did have kids, I'm dreading. That's why I'm just hoping we only have one. I don't want to get a minivan. I'm never gonna drive
Well,
this goddamn thing.
I have one child, and my whole thing is if I do get my next vehicle would probably be a seven-seater SUV, just because I think that's the next step. If you don't want to get a minivan but you still want a practical vehicle, you're not going to get as much headroom space or trunk space as a minivan, because in the minivan you fold the seats down, you take the middle seats
Yeah, yeah,
out.
they're very
Yeah,
convenient.
but at the same time, it's how often do you really need that? I think it's starting to become more of a niche where if someone has three, four kids, then it makes perfect sense, where they can lug around a lot of luggage and then carry, that's why they call it a soccer mom's van, right? But in my case, I'm just thinking if I do, I'd probably just end up with an SUV seven seater.
There's some good seven seaters coming out uh,
Yeah,
that may give a minivan, run for its money.
I agree. Well, I'm gonna wrap up this podcast. So Dave and I just discussed on self-driving vehicles, and we're looking to see what you have for your thoughts. If you want to comment and let us know what are your thoughts on self-driving vehicles and the 5G connection that's important to them.
Right.
Dave, you want to have any final words before I end this podcast?
No, nothing else to add. I think it would be nice to, on the next podcast, get maybe a specialized guy who can educate us more on
Definitely,
5G.
definitely,
Um,
definitely. All right. Thank you for
good.
listening. Bye.